Hola y bienvenidos. Quiero empezar esta lección, nuestra lección 16, de una manera diferente. En vez de hablar de gramática o vocabulario o cultura, prefiero hacer otra cosa. ¿Y qué quiero hacer? Pues, quiero tocar el piano para ustedes. What I've decided to play is the opening section of Bach's First Prelude. But before I begin, I'd just like to say a few quick things about the relationship between communicating in a foreign language and singing or playing music. In my years teaching Spanish, I quite often have taught students who are also musicians. I mention this because being a musician can help you if you're a language student. Here's why. Musicians tend to be good listeners because they're working to play or sing the proper notes in the right rhythm. And if they're part of a group making music, then listening to other musicians while singing or playing is crucial to blending in and making the whole group sound good. Being a good listener is also very useful for language students because one of your goals should be to reproduce in your own speaking the sounds you hear from native speakers. And it's not enough to listen just to the pronunciation at the level of the words. You also need to be listening to linguistic aspects like how one word connects to the next, where to place emphasis when speaking, and how volume and tone go up and down. The other advantage musicians bring to language study is that they understand the nature of practice. Musicians know that the more they practice, the better they get at singing or playing their instrument. And an important aspect of this knowledge, of course, is understanding that it's not always fun to practice. Sometimes it's fun, but at other times it's more like a necessary task you need to accomplish. Whether the practice is fun or not, good musicians have trained themselves to practice because they know there's a direct correlation between the time they spend practicing and their level of improvement as musicians. Here's my last thought on this relationship between studying languages and studying music. You don't need to be a musician to communicate in Spanish at a very high level. I've had non-musicians in my classes who were fabulous students of the Spanish language and as a result can now communicate in Spanish extremely well. But among the reasons these students did so well with the language is that they were really good listeners and they practiced their language skills often. Okay, so back to Bach. I will now play for you the start of Bach's First Prelude. I hope you like it. I could go on, but I realize this is a Spanish course, not a music course, so I think that's enough music for the moment. You might be wondering at this point, why did I just play the piano for you? Am I tired of teaching Spanish? Am I trying to show off? No and no. I'm still excited about teaching you Spanish, and I wasn't trying to show off. So what's with the Bach then? Okay, here's the deal. When I told you I was going to play the piano, I bet some of you were thinking, I didn't know Bill played piano. I wonder if he plays well. Then I began playing, and pretty quickly you formed an impression of my ability to play the piano. In fact, I only played about 20 or 25 seconds, so you came to some sort of conclusion regarding my skills at the piano in a very short time. That's totally normal. You used the limited input I gave you, my playing one particular piece of music for a relatively short time, and came to some sort of judgment of my ability as a pianist. As a result of the way I played, maybe you'd like to hear more. Or maybe your thought was, okay, Bill, that was different. Could you please stick to Spanish in the future? This same sort of mental process, one that results in a judgment of abilities, will occur in the minds of other people when they learn that you speak Spanish. Whoever you're talking to will probably think something like, "Oh, I didn't know you speak Spanish. I wonder if you speak well." And then, pretty quickly, probably in about 20 or 25 seconds, the person you're talking to will make some sort of judgment about how good your Spanish is. So why am I talking about first impressions? Because ideally, the first impression you make when speaking Spanish will be a good one. Starting off well will encourage the other person to continue the conversation in Spanish. That should be one of your goals, to speak as much Spanish and hear as much Spanish as possible. If, on the other hand, you start off poorly, making multiple errors from the very first words you say, the other person will be less inclined to continue a conversation in Spanish. In the way that some of you hearing my playing of Bach may have thought, "Could you please just stick to Spanish?" A Spanish speaker hearing lots of errors from you may start to think, "Could we please just stick to English?" So, let me go back to Bach for a moment. How did I play? Well, those of you who really are pianists could certainly tell that I'm not ready for the concert stage. On the other hand, I'd like to think it wasn't too bad. And that's actually quite an accomplishment for me because I'm actually a very limited pianist. I mess around on the piano, I can play a little, but almost the only piece of serious music I'm reasonably able to play is Bach's First Prelude. That's why I decided to play it for you, to make a good first impression. And I'm not the only one who does that. I remember when I was a child, my parents had lots of parties where there was a piano and a guitar, and everyone was invited to sing a song. Why aren't there parties like that nowadays? Those were fun parties. In any case, most people had one song, their party piece, that they would sing. And you know what? Those songs sounded great. It's not that my parents' friends were professional singers who had unbelievable talent. It's that before the event, people knew the kind of party it would be, that there'd probably be a time when everyone sang solos, so they prepared before they arrived at the party. What sort of preparation was involved? It was really just deciding on the tune they'd sing, making sure they knew all the words. You really should know all the words, even the second and third verse, and practicing before the party. Then, when the time came, everyone performed a solo with panache. So, I'm encouraging you, as a Spanish speaker, to have a party piece, to know the first thing you're going to say when you start speaking Spanish with someone for the first time. And to help you with the process, I'm going to give you 4 possibilities. Pick the one you like the best, or adapt one of these into something you like better. You'll find these openers in the workbook, so you can either memorize or adapt one. And remember, the context here is, this will be the first thing you'll say to someone when they learn that you speak Spanish. Or maybe this is the way you let someone know you speak the language. Here are some possible things you could say. Hablo español, pero solo un poco. Soy estudiante de la lengua y me gusta hablar, pero entiendo mucho más de lo que puedo decir. Repitan. Hablo español, pero solo un poco. Soy estudiante de la lengua y me gusta hablar, pero entiendo mucho más de lo que puedo decir. If you say something like that and you pronounce it well, which you will because you'll have practiced it, you'll make a very good first impression. Maybe you're being a bit modest here because maybe you could speak more than solo un poco, but that's okay. It's better to underpromise than overpromise. Here's another opener you can consider. Puedo entender español mejor de lo que puedo hablar, pero me gusta comunicarme en español y siempre tengo ganas de hablarlo. Repitan. Puedo entender español mejor de lo que puedo hablar, pero me gusta comunicarme en español. Y siempre tengo ganas de hablarlo. Here's another option, one that uses a new word. Repitan. El principiante. El principiante o la principiante is beginner. This option also includes the expression, repitan, me gustaría, which means I would like. The word gustaría is in the conditional tense, which we'll look at extensively in our next lesson. So here it is. Hablo español, pero soy principiante. Si le parece bien, me gustaría hablar español un poco con usted. Repitan. Hablo español, pero soy principiante. Si le parece bien, me gustaría hablar español un poco con usted. And here's the last possibility. Soy estudiante de español, me gusta el idioma y quiero mejorar mi español. Repitan. Soy estudiante de español. Me gusta el idioma y quiero mejorar mi español. So those are just a few possible things you can say when working to begin a conversation in Spanish. You can memorize one of these openers, adapt one of them, or make up your own. The idea is quite simple. If you start by speaking Spanish well, it's more likely that the person you're talking to will want to continue conversing in the language with you. Last point. It's not necessary that you communicate in flawless Spanish. Maybe you just like the language and want to play around with it, and that's fine. That's what I do with the piano. I just play around with it. But if you're interested over time in improving your language abilities, the more you speak, the better your communicative skills will get. And making a good first impression is one way to help you speak more Spanish. Let's leave behind music and first impressions and move on to the topic of vocabulary. El tema que vamos a investigar en detalle es el de los cognados y los cognados falsos. Sabemos que los cognados son palabras similares en dos idiomas que tienen el mismo significado. De hecho, la palabra similar es un cognado porque se escribe igual en inglés y español y significa la misma cosa en los dos idiomas. Por otro lado, los cognados falsos son las palabras que parecen significar la misma cosa, pero en realidad significan algo diferente. Sé que he hablado mucho en este curso sobre los cognados y su utilidad para estudiantes como ustedes que están aprendiendo español. Pues en esta lección voy a describir con números la frecuencia de los cognados y su gran utilidad cuando se usan en español. Muy bien. So, let me talk about some new vocabulary I just used. Repeat these words. El detalle, en detalle, falso, similar, igual, por otro lado, la utilidad. I'm going to ask you to guess the meanings of these words. El detalle, a noun that's sort of a cognate, is detail. So the expression en detalle means in detail. And what I just said with this new vocabulary was, el tema que vamos a investigar en detalle es el de los cognados y los cognados falsos. That sentence also includes falso, which in English is false. Several of the other new words I just used are also cognates. I'll give you the Spanish, you give me the English. Similar is similar. A useful synonym for similar is, repitan, semejante. La utilidad is utility or usefulness. Good. Now, some words related to ones we've seen previously. We've seen that el lado means side. And you might be able to guess that in English, por un lado means on one hand, while the expression por otro lado means on the other hand. In fact, here's the expression I used in this context. Por un lado, debo trabajar más, pero por otro lado, tengo ganas de descansar. We know that the adverb igualmente means likewise. So maybe you can guess that the adjective igual means equal or same. Another important word in that sentence, and we've seen it before, is the adjective mismo, which means same. I used several of these words when I said, la palabra similar es un cognado porque se escribe igual en inglés y español y significa la misma cosa en las dos lenguas. Un punto más. Como los adjetivos similar y semejante son sinónimos, el significado de estas dos palabras es igual. Fantástico, ustedes han hecho buen trabajo con el vocabulario nuevo. So let's talk more in detail about cognates and false cognates. Cognados y cognados falsos. You know that cognates are words that are the same or similar in two languages. Cognates in Spanish and English include the adjectives popular, ideal, diferente, the nouns la música, el pianista, el concierto. You'll notice that some cognates are spelled exactly the same in both languages, like popular, while others are close but not exactly the same, like la música. Okay, so here's a question I'd like you to ponder. In the world of Spanish and English, how common are cognates? And how common are false cognates? Before looking at the numbers, let me make a few observations about cognates. First of all, in general, cognates are easier to recognize when reading than when listening to spoken Spanish. Consider this sentence, one that includes a number of cognates I introduced in the first course. First, just listen. Me interesan las características generales de las celebraciones de las familias. So did you understand everything I just said? Maybe you did, and if so, great. But if you didn't understand everything, that's fine too. Now look at the same sentence on the screen. Reading this sentence piece by piece gives us, I am interested in the general characteristics of the celebrations of the families, or the general characteristics of the family celebrations interest me. For most students, it's easier to read and understand those words than it is to hear and understand them. As for false cognates, here are three examples we saw in the first course. The noun, el colegio, looks like in English it should be college, but it really means high school. The adjective largo looks like it should mean large, it actually means long. Finally, the noun el pariente looks like in English it should be parent. In Spanish, it actually means relative. Here's something else to consider. There is no exact definition of what a cognate is. Everyone would agree that the word formal is a cognate. It's spelled exactly the same in both languages and has the same meaning. And there's also general agreement that, for example, interesante and noviembre are cognates because they're pretty close to interesting and November. But what about recibir, which means to receive? Is that close enough to be a cognate? Some would say yes. I think recibir is a little too distant from receive to count as a cognate. In any case, the point I'm making is that it's very useful for language learners to understand the frequency of cognates and false cognates, but determining exactly what counts as either a cognate or a false cognate is not an exact science. So, let me return to the question I posed earlier regarding how common cognates and false cognates are in Spanish. We'll start with cognates. I consulted a frequency dictionary of Spanish and went word by word through the 2,000 most commonly used words in Spanish. Guess which word in Spanish is used the most? The winner is a tie between the two definite articles el and la. The next most popular words are de, que, y, and a. So those are the words that are used the most in Spanish. My question now is, how many of the 2,000 most commonly used words in Spanish are cognates with English words? What do you think? Could there be 50 cognates? More? Yes, definitely more. So what's the actual number? Well, here it is. 660 of the most commonly used 2,000 words in Spanish are cognates. That means 33% of the most commonly used words in Spanish are similar to words in English that mean the same thing. La misma cosa. So what about false cognates? How common are they? Could there be 50 false cognates? More? Well, in fact, of the 2,000 most commonly used words in Spanish, just 40 of them, or 2%, are false cognates. Let me repeat those percentages related to the most commonly used words in Spanish. 33% of them are cognates, and just 2% of them are false cognates. So, if you come across a new Spanish word that's similar to an English word, it is roughly 16 times more likely that the word is a cognate than a false cognate. Once again, these numbers are based on my analysis of the 2,000 most commonly used words in Spanish. If I looked at some other subset of Spanish vocabulary, the numbers would be slightly different, but the conclusion would be the same. Cognates are much, much, much more common than false cognates. So, let's learn some new cognates that are nouns. Repitan. La importancia, la diferencia, el servicio, la consecuencia, la obligación. And now, some verbs that are cognates. Informar, transformar, limitar, causar, iniciar, utilizar. Finally, here are some cognates that are adjectives. Repitan. Auténtico, moderno, directo, constante, nacional. And let me say a few words about this new vocabulary. In the first course, we saw that if you ask, ¿Dónde están los servicios?, you're asking where the public restrooms are. In general, el servicio means service, and you might hear someone say, a su servicio, at your service. The adjective direct is directo, so the adverb directly is directamente. Likewise, the adjective constant is constante, so the adverb constantly is constantemente. As with all new vocabulary you learn, these words only become yours if you start to use them. So look for ways to incorporate them in your speaking and writing. Finally, let me introduce you to some new false cognates, words that look like they probably mean one thing, but actually mean something else. Repitan. Actual, actualmente, estrechar. The adjective actual looks like it should mean actual, but in fact it means current, present. La situación actual es difícil. Similarly, actualmente looks like it should mean actually when it actually means currently, at the present moment. So how do you say actual in Spanish? There are a few ways. Repitan. Verdadero, real. The adjective verdadero is related to la verdad, which we know means truth. La situación verdadera would be the true situation. As for the English word actual, most commonly in Spanish the word used is real, which can mean real or actual. La situación real would be the actual situation. The noun real can also mean royal, though this meaning is used much less frequently. In Spain, for example, la familia real means the royal family, while the soccer team Real Madrid means Royal Madrid. The adverb actually in Spanish would be realmente, though you could also use verdaderamente, which literally means truly. Finally, estrechar does not mean to stretch, instead it means to narrow. Estrechar is also related to the adjective estrecho, which means narrow. Repitan, estrechar, estrecho. In Spanish, those streets are narrow would be esas calles son estrechas. The verb to stretch is, repitan, estirar. Mírenme, yo estoy estirándome ahora. And since we're discussing new vocabulary, let me add something about a new expression I used at the start of the lesson. I said, en vez de hablar de gramática o vocabulario o cultura, prefiero hacer otra cosa. We know that la vez means time, as in occurrence of something. En vez de means instead of. And we know that el lugar means place. Well, en lugar de is another way to say instead of. Repitan. En vez de. En lugar de. Final point on false cognates, and we've already seen this. They're pretty rare. So when in doubt, your best bet is to guess that a Spanish word similar to an English word is a cognate rather than a false cognate. En otras palabras, normalmente una palabra similar, es decir, semejante, en inglés y español es un cognado. Existen muy pocos cognados falsos. I'd like to end this lesson where we began it, at the piano. And by the way, I'm not being modest about my piano abilities. Ask my wife and children, who would hear me play more than they want to. They'd probably describe my playing as enthusiastic, but not quite good. In any case, I'll end the lesson now playing, what should I play? You know, I think I'll play Bach's First Prelude.
Glosario en audio, lección 16.
Give the Spanish for the following English words. Then repeat the Spanish word. Instead of.
En vez de.
Instead of.
En lugar de.
Beginner.
El principiante.
Detail.
El detalle.
In detail.
En detalle.
False.
Falso.
Similar.
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 Semejante.
Equal. Same.
Igual.
On one hand.
Por un lado.
On the other hand.
Por otro lado.
Usefulness. Utility.
La utilidad.
To use. To utilize.
Utilizar.
Importance.
La importancia.
Difference.
La diferencia.
Service.
El servicio.
Consequence.
La consecuencia.
Obligation.
La obligación.
To inform.
Informar.
To transform.
Transformar.
To limit.
Limitar.
To cause.
Causar.
To initiate.
Iniciar.
Authentic.
Auténtico.
Modern.
Moderno.
Direct.
Directo.
Directly.
Directamente.
Constant.
Constante.
Constantly.
Constantemente.
National.
Nacional.
Current. Present.
Actual.
Currently. At the moment.
Actualmente.
To narrow.
Estrechar.
Narrow.
Estrecho.
To stretch.
Estirar.
Real. Actual. Royal.
Real.
Truly.
Verdaderamente. Actividades de conversación. Lección 16.
Give the Spanish for the following English sentences. When we were young, we would play at the beach all day.
Cuando éramos jóvenes, jugábamos en la playa todo el día.
Will they leave tonight?
¿Saldrán esta noche? ¿O van a salir esta noche?
Many of our friends visit us often.
Muchos de nuestros amigos nos visitan a menudo.
After half an hour, I succeeded in opening the door.
Después de media hora, yo pude abrir la puerta.
I wonder what time it is.
¿Qué hora será?
They were working while we were sleeping.
Trabajaban mientras dormíamos.
They greeted each other with many kisses.
Se saludaron con muchos besos.
This street is too narrow for these cars.
Esta calle es demasiado estrecha para estos carros.
I forgot the keys, and then we lost the money.
Se me olvidaron las llaves y luego se nos perdió el dinero.
We want to limit the number of employees.
Queremos limitar el número de empleados.
Answer the following sentence with a double object pronoun. For example, ¿me vas a dar los libros?
Sí, te los voy a dar o voy a dártelos.
¿Le escribiste una carta a Ricardo?
Sí, se la escribí.
¿Ustedes les mandan el dinero a los chicos?
Sí, se lo mandamos.
¿Carlos te mandó la información?
Sí, Carlos me la mandó.
¿Tú me dijiste la verdad?
Sí, te la dije.
Pedro, ¿te escribió muchas notas?
Sí, me las escribió.
Change these sentences from the ir plus a plus infinitive construction to the future tense. Example, vas a verme mañana.
Me verás mañana.
Vamos a comer ahora.
Comeremos ahora.
¿Qué vas a hacer mañana?
¿Qué harás mañana?
Tú vas a tener éxito en el futuro.
Tú tendrás éxito en el futuro.
Voy a viajar, pero ellos no van a ir conmigo.
Viajaré, pero ellos no irán conmigo.
Los hombres van a poner la mesa.
Los hombres pondrán la mesa.
Give the Spanish word for the following English words. Authentic,
Auténtico.
directly,
Directamente.
difference,
La diferencia.
modern,
Moderno.
to stretch,
Estirar.
instead of,
En vez de. En lugar de.
national.
Nacional.
Las 4 direcciones son norte, sur, este y oeste. Contesta las siguientes preguntas. Ejemplo,
¿En qué dirección vas para ir de Alabama a Tennessee?
al norte,
¿En qué dirección vas para ir de Chile a Argentina?
al este,
¿En qué dirección vas para ir de California a Baja California?
al sur,
¿En qué dirección vas para ir de Perú a Brasil?
al este,
¿En qué dirección vas para ir de Venezuela a Colombia?
al oeste,
¿En qué dirección vas para ir de Nicaragua a Costa Rica?
al sur.